1. This first started when I went to a summer camp in my junior year of high school and I met this girl. Her name is Mar. I introduced myself to Mar, and then for the rest of the 6 weeks, I probably talked to her a total of 3 times, which includes my introduction, the time she locked me and my friend into a room, and when I said goodbye when the camp ended. She seemed really nice, and I thought she was extremely sweet. Fast forward a year. I get a text out of nowhere saying, "Hey, I missed you, it's me, Mar." We continue to text, catching up on our lives. At the time, I thought this was normal, as I usually get texts from the people at camp trying to catch up, and it was really nice hearing where they were in life. About 9 texts in, after catching up on our lives, she suddenly asks, "Will you go to prom with me?" I dismissed it as strange because I thought she was probably desperate to get a date for prom, and me being about a 1-hour drive away was a good distance. She lets me know the date of her prom, which I realize is the day after my prom and the day before one of my concerts on an orchestra I was in at the time. I let her know my situation, but she continues to try to convince me to go. Every day after, she continues to text me multiple times, asking if I could go, saying that I had time to go and that I should do it for her. I said yes in the end. I felt like she really wanted a date to prom for the experience, and I thought, why not? I would want the same if I were in her situation. What could go wrong? 3 days later, I'm playing some games on my PC at the time when I hear my older sister yell the weirdest thing from downstairs. "Your girl is here!" Confused, I go to the window of my room, and what do you know? Mar is standing right in my driveway, smiling and waving at me. Sure, most people think, my God, how does she find my address? How does she know I'm free? What the fuck? My dumbass instantly thought, oh shit, she drove an hour here, I feel kind of bad. I head outside to meet her and ask her why she was there. And the first thing she says was, "I drove an hour here. You should take me on a date." Behind me is my dad, approvingly shaking his head, and before I can say anything, he tells me to go. The man has such a proud look on his face. And that's when I started to realize maybe this situation is kinda bad. Maybe. I take her out to a Chinese restaurant and decide to order 3 plates of food, all for myself. I realized that maybe if I kept eating, I could decrease the time I had to talk, as I'm chewing 75% of the time. To start off, she tells me all the guys she's ever went after were taken by people she knew. She got increasingly mad as she kept talking to the point where people started to look. Suddenly, she asks me about my relationship with this girl that I had a thing with a few months back. In my head again, I think, this is fine. She probably knows about that because she's friends with her friends. They probably told her. I explain my situation about how I don't talk to the girl anymore, and Mars suddenly gets a flare in her eye. She asks me about what I plan to do for the time till college. And if I'm interested in dating, I tell her I don't plan to do anything until college. After a few more places we go because she said she wouldn't leave until she was satisfied with her time here. I go back home and we decide to play games on my Wii. After a solid game of Super Smash Brawl, she realizes I'm not having fun and says, "I guess you're kicking me out," then proceeds to try to kiss me. Out of panic, I put my entire right hand on her face, pushing her away, basically slapping her and giving her a facepalm. I lead her out of my house and to her car, and once she gets in, she starts to take pictures of me on her Snapchat story with the caption, "First date." I tell my parents about my situation, and I swear to God they literally brush it away, saying, "Oh, people can be like that. You should be happy a girl likes you." My sister slowly figures out that maybe this isn't good, but agrees with my parents because she thought it'd be funny to see how this went. 2 weeks later of dodging her texts or asking her to come over again, I'm heading to her pre-prom party. I am completely exhausted to the point where I could not run, and I was just not ready for another prom. Surprisingly, the pre-prom party and the prom was a lot of fun. Mar did not do anything that made me feel uncomfortable, and her friends were amazingly funny. After the prom, she takes me back to her friend's house. She then asks if I can stay the night, which I say I can't due to my concert that I have the day after. She then proceeds to get very angry and tries to push for it. So I text my sister, "Help." And for the first goddamn time, she comes to my rescue. An hour later, as Mar is getting increasingly madder, I get a call from my sister saying that she's outside. I let Em know and I leave, so relieved that my day of prom with her was over. A few months later, I get an anonymous letter in the mail addressed to me. Inside were 3 pages filled front and back with a declaration of love from Em. It explained how she fell in love with me at first sight, how everything I did made her love me even more, how she couldn't be without me. I met up with a friend a few days later, and he shows me his Snapchat conversations with her. It's just a wall of text, a wall of questions, asking personal questions about me. For the next year while I was in college, I would get random texts and Snapchats from her showing pictures of her coming to my town asking where I was. There were times she would go to my town's high school games and send me pictures of our coaches, with their jackets and the name of my town on there. Eventually, she stopped messaging me because I had blocked her on everything. So yeah, let's not meet ever again, please. 2. Surprisingly, this must have had more impact on me than I thought or realized, because it seems the older I get, the more I revisit this night in my head. I was 17, and this was back in the 90s. No one had cell phones, the internet was in its infancy, and we were all just grasping email and browsing around the World Wide Web. I guess what I'm trying to drive home is that today, right now, we're all connected 24/7. Back when I was 17, the world was still mostly unplugged. We didn't have countless options at our fingertips. I'm not sure if that's a good thing or a bad thing. It's just a different thing. I remember this night because it was a school night, and my parents had to spend the night at my grandmother's house because they needed to be up early and in the town she lived in. They never offered to take me, and I didn't want to go because I enjoyed being alone, having a little privacy. I'm a night owl, that's what I am. It's what I've always been. Come midnight, I'm just getting started. I was on the family computer in a random Yahoo chat room, which is in the office, and the window overlooks our backyard. It was past midnight, and for some reason it had just dawned on me that I'd been hearing crunchy snow footsteps in the snow in our backyard. I didn't get scared. I didn't even really get curious. I just acknowledged the sound of the footsteps coming from my backyard. I don't know why this didn't bother me. Maybe I was being naive. So the noise continued, but I didn't pay attention to it much. Maybe I thought it was a wild animal. We lived right next to the woods. About half an hour later, I was in the kitchen heating up some leftovers. Nothing better than a midnight snack. I just happened to glance in the direction of the living room, and I saw some movement out of the living room picture window. I halted in the kitchen, and I stared across the living room and out the window to that brief movement, which caught my attention. It took me a second to focus, and when I did see what it was, at that point I started to get nervous. A pickup truck with its headlights off was creeping down the road directly in front of my house. It came to a painfully slow stop directly in front of my house. The pickup truck, had I not managed to see its movement, would have been blended perfectly in the darkness. The truck freaked me out bad. I was pretty sure the driver couldn't see me from my vantage point in the kitchen. All the living room lights were off. Our kitchen and living room go into each other. They connect. Walk out the kitchen into the living room. Leave the living room for the kitchen. Either way, I stood in the kitchen and just stared at the parked truck. My mind raced. What was going on? It was like 2 a.m. and there was this pickup truck parked in front of our house. It was driving down our road with its headlights off. That really messed with my head. So I stood there, convinced I could not be seen, and I doubt I was spotted, but I couldn't move a muscle. I was terrified. I stared at the black shape of the pickup truck, and I tried to focus on the driver. It was just too dark. Then I thought maybe I should call my parents or the police. I didn't want to get everyone worried, and I was really in a state of pure panic. I counted to 3 in my head, and I bolted for the phone hanging on the kitchen wall. I felt safer just holding the phone. I thought about calling my grandmother's house to get my dad on the phone. Then I felt maybe I should just call the cops. Have them stop by and see what's up with the creepy truck. I didn't call anyone. Instead, I just inched, taking these slow steps of fear toward the spot in the kitchen where I could see out of the living room picture window. I watched the truck for a few minutes, waiting to see what the driver's next move was going to be. I was trying to convince myself that this driver creeping around my house well past midnight was just a strange coincidence or something. I just stared at the dark spot I knew was a pickup, and I couldn't make any sense of it. Eventually, after at least 10 or 20 minutes being parked in front of my house, the truck did a 3-point turn, headlights off, and drove away. I clung to the phone. I was shaken pretty badly, but I was glad that I didn't call the police or my parents. No need to get everyone worried. I knew sleep was not an option, so I turned on the lights, all the lights, to feel more comfortable. I turned on the TV in the living room and put in my favorite movie at the time, Dazed and Confused. I had a copy of Dazed and Confused recorded on a VHS tape with Happy Gilmore. The next morning I discovered footprints in the snow around my house. I honestly couldn't tell you if there was 1 or 2 or 3 sets of footprints. There were just a lot of footprints. My parents have a door in their bedroom that goes to the backyard. I had completely forgot my dad broke the door trying to change the doorknob. It happened a few days prior to the night my parents stayed at my grandmother's. Dad tends to start projects and stall out if it doesn't go his way. Once he runs into any trouble with his projects, my old man is quick to put it on the back burner. That's what he did with the door. I was thankful for a couple of things. First, I was happy that the sound of footsteps in the snowy backyard crunching all over the place didn't freak me out to begin with. That would have really kicked off some pure terror. It's hard to explain what went on in my head when I realized someone or something was tromping around the house. I cannot explain why that didn't panic me. I mean, someone was in our backyard past midnight. I was so thankful that I had forgotten about the broken door. It didn't even cross my mind. But had I gotten freaked out by the footsteps I could hear in the backyard, undoubtedly my mind would go apeshit crazy knowing my parents' door was broken and was unlocked for anyone to come in. I would have called the police. When I found the footprints the following morning, I followed the path of prints around my house, and part of me wonders if they did get into the house. Footprints were right next to my parents' back door, but I couldn't tell if the door was opened or if somebody had walked into my house. Nothing was missing, and nothing was vandalized. It was just a weird night that still scares the living shit out of me. 3. I live in a small town about 50 minutes from Waterloo, Ontario, Canada. I work nights and have for around 14 years now. I usually prefer the night shift, but my 50-minute commute can be a bit much sometimes. I am in my mid-40s, female, and I drive an older model Dodge Caliber. A smallish crossover-type car, quite utilitarian. I prefer a particular back road that parallels the main highway as it enters Waterloo very close to my workplace, allowing me to avoid a lot of city driving. Most of the time my commute is uneventful, barring our sometimes frustrating winter weather. But 2 weeks ago, I experienced an upsetting commute that has nothing whatsoever to do with snow. I was on my way to work at 9:30 at night, when I came upon 2 vehicles driving very slowly in an area with a posted limit of 80 kph. Both of these cars were going at least 60. I assumed they were traveling together, as there were times that the second car could have safely passed, and they made the same turns. When the oncoming lane was clear and it was legal to overtake, I signaled and pulled out to pass. As soon as I signaled and began my pass, the second car also pulled out to overtake without signaling. I was able to safely complete my pass despite this, though it did surprise me. That car then completed its pass and pulled in behind me. I was driving at a bit above the posted limit, having just passed the other car, so it was strange to me that the car now following mine suddenly accelerated and got so close to my rear bumper that I could not even see his headlights. Twit, I thought. I sped up a wee bit, now doing 100 kph, maybe a bit higher. He remained glued to my bumper, so close that if I even had to tap my brakes, he would have hit me. I was starting to get a little bit rattled. Due to the dark night, all I could see of that car was very infrequent glimpses of its headlights, and the fact that it was dark in color and seemed to be a 4-door sedan. I considered digging through my laptop bag for my phone, but dismissed that idea as I knew I needed to keep my attention firmly on my driving. Thinking I could encourage him to pass, I eased off on the accelerator and let my speed come down very gradually. I really didn't want Mr. Impatient behind me crawling any further up my tailpipe than he already was. But even though I bled my speed down to 90, then 80, then 75, he would not pass. Even though the oncoming lane was clear and he had many chances to legally and safely overtake me, he remained right on my bumper, so close his headlights couldn't even be seen. There is a little tiny town of less than 20 houses along that stretch of road, and there's a 4-way stop right in the middle. I stopped, and went through when it was my turn. Another car made a right and pulled in behind me when it was their turn, and I thought to myself, good, someone else for Mr. Impatient to tailgate. At this point, I still thought the aggressive driver was just another impatient asshole and nothing more. I was soon proved wrong. I sped back up again, thinking to put some distance between me and Mr. Impatient, now that the car had pulled in behind me was between us. The oncoming lane was no longer clear for passing, and remained thankfully busy for a while. I used that time to lay on the gas and put as much space between us as possible. Eventually I managed to get around a kilometer ahead. At that point, the oncoming lane became clear, and I shot a glance back in the rearview mirror just in time to see Mr. Impatient rocket past the car ahead of him and race to catch up to me. This is when my being vaguely irked became a whole lot more than vaguely nervous. This fool was chasing me. This road is a straight one, with one S-bend a bit further along. There are a few places to turn off that aren't gravel roads or driveways into farms. I briefly considered taking one of these, but I hate gravel roads at high speeds. Too easy to lose control and skid. And if I pulled into a farm laneway and he noticed and followed, I'd be trapped. I continued as I was. I took the S-band faster than I would otherwise have done, but despite my speed, Mr. Impatient was soon right back up on my back bumper. He was really making me nervous at this point, flashing his lights, backing off only to race back up at me, swerving in and out of our lane. I went through another 4-way stop hoping this jerk behind me would turn off, but of course he didn't. He kept aggressively following me, acting as though he intended to ram my car, until we came into yet another 4-way stop. Another car turned in behind me, putting a barrier between me and Mr. Impatient once again. I used that to get a bit ahead of him again. At this point, we were approaching a little town with one stoplight. If I was lucky, I would get the green. If I had the green, it was inevitable that he would get the red. If I was really lucky, the cop who often sits in the lot of the town's one gas station would be there, and I would be able to tell him what was going on. Mr. Impatient had passed the other car and was only about 50 meters behind me when I got to the corner with the stoplight. The light turned yellow as I approached, and after making sure it was still safe to cross, I squeaked in just before the light turned red and the traffic began to cross. That last corner has a lot of transport and semi-truck traffic, so it isn't one where you'd want to risk running a red light. So yeah, I was lucky with the lights, but no cop. Where's a cop when you need one, eh? Still, I was able to leave Mr. Impatient at the lights, and I was nearing Waterloo. Traffic was picking up, so it would be hard for him to tell which set of taillights were mine. A glance at the clock once I got into the city told me I was a few minutes early, and since I didn't want to lead this aggressive idiot to my workplace, I made a right onto a busy road and then into a busy little commercial complex that housed a gas station, a convenience store, an all-night pizza place, a fast food burger place, a coffee shop, a pharmacy, and a bank. The place was hopping, so I began to feel safe. I parked in the burger joint's lot, which could not be seen from the street, and went in to order. I figured if the guy had still managed to follow me, I was now in a public place with both restaurant staff and other customers. He'd be unlikely to follow me in, and even less likely to start a violent scene with other people around. I got my order and then sat in the restaurant for a few more minutes. I wanted to be sure Mr. Impatient had left the area before I went on to work. I would be in my workplace alone all night, and the building really isn't that secure, as the main floor has a lot of huge windows. An attacker would only need a rock in order to gain entry. There are alarms, of course, but it would still take about 15 to 20 minutes before any help would arrive. When I left the burger place, I was very cautious. I scanned the lot for any vehicle that was running. Nothing nearby. I dashed to my car, got in, locked the doors, and cautiously left the lot. I took a circuitous route to my workplace, taking many random turns, but no one was following me. I had managed to lose my pursuer. I still have no real idea why he decided to chase me. My area isn't one for gangs, that's more a Toronto GTA problem, and not a rural SW Ontario problem. My car is older, not an expensive or luxurious brand, and not the sort you'd think that someone would go to such a potentially violent trouble to steal. I sure as hell haven't got money. And I'm not a young, attractive woman, I'm middle-aged, heavy-set, and physically disabled. So not someone that usually attracts unwelcome attention. The only thing that makes any sense to me is that it was a group of young men in Daddy's car, thinking it was ever so much fun to throw a scare into another driver. Someone I know had that happen to them this past summer on that road, when a group of 18 to 20-year-old boys followed her vehicle in the same scary manner. Yeah, ever fun, wholesome entertainment for a boring night. Little shits. You never know what another driver is thinking. Be careful out there. And to whomever was in that car behind me, let's not meet, because next time I'll have my billy club, and it won't go well for you. Hey everybody, Hellfreezer here, and thank you very much for listening to 3 True Scary Stories, episode 380. And thank you very much to everybody who allowed me to use their stories in this video. Well, if all has gone according to plan, I might actually have an extra day off over the weekend. Weekend will be over by the time you hear this. But I don't know what happened to me on Tuesday. I was bored on Tuesday, so I thought I'm going to go upstairs, set the mic and everything up, and I'm going to get recording on the next couple of videos. And I ended up recording stories for 5 videos. Well, let me think. It was 4 videos it was. But it basically meant I had most of my weekend recording done days before I even got to it, which was lovely. Yeah, so hopefully I've enjoyed an extra day off. Don't know what I'll do with it. Don't know if I'll go. Don't think I'll go out because the weather hasn't been that great lately. It's like you'll get a bit of sun, but you might get wind and snow and hail and everything. It's not great. So maybe cups of tea, possibly a bit of exercise, and I've got a punch bag that could do with a bit of a thrashing. Bought it ages ago and I haven't really done much with it, so I should get to using it. And films and things. I always keep saying, I'm going to make time watch films and all. And I've got films like on my Netflix queue that I mean to watch. I've got a bunch saved on Amazon Prime as well. I always mean to get round to it, then I get distracted. I'm either just sitting essentially doing nothing, or just browsing random nonsense on the internet. Or I get distracted watching vlogs and things. I've been watching vlogs recently by a Canadian vlogger named Willow Faith. I think her name's actually Willow McDonald, but Willow Faith is her YouTube name. And it's just it's about her and her girlfriend, and quite frankly it's depressing because they're so bloody cute together, and it's like, ugh, I really need a girlfriend. Ah well, all things in time, eh? Okay, with that I'm going to head off for now, so until next time, thank you very much for listening, and take very good care of yourselves.